Hello, everyone, and welcome. In this recording, I'm going to be speaking about this Uranus retrograde that is taking place either today or tomorrow, depending on where you are on the planet. And I'm going to include a little bit of other energies as well, especially those that influence us in the present moment quite a lot. So let's begin with Uranus retrograde because every single year, this is quite a big energy because it shifts us. Sometimes, usually, it may not shift us in a very significant way, but mentally, our attention, our focus, especially what our mind is concentrated upon, that usually um, experiences a shift at every single Uranus retrograde. However, at this one, it's especially uh, significant and very, very intense because on one hand, Uranus is in totally new territory in Gemini, where it will stay for the next 7 years. But before it makes its stay permanent in the sign of Gemini, it will retrograde back briefly into Taurus to finish its job. Um, Uranus will only re-enter Taurus, so retrograde back into Taurus on the 7th of November. So we're not experiencing that side of the energy yet. However, it's still in a little bit of in the mix of all things because Uranus has not advanced very much into Gemini. So basically, it, especially now, in the present moment, it's hanging around at the gateway between Gemini and Taurus. It's specifically at 1 degree and 28 minutes of Gemini. So this is where it stands still in the sky. Of course, with any retrograde and standstill, it's an optical illusion. The planet in physical reality, or astronomically speaking, is not moving backwards. So we're using the symbolism. So when the planet is standing still in the sky, especially a big planet, and especially a planet that has a lot to do with the influence of flow of anythings. So Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. Mercury, it's so very, how should I say, easy to understand that it controls the flow in very many ways in our lives. Flow of information, flow of thoughts, flow of, well, in this day and age, even electricity, water, where we go, where we travel, that's our flow, our connection. So it's so easy to understand how Mercury is connected with the flow. So its higher octave is also flow, but on higher level, right? So very many times when Uranus makes this shift in movement, our higher minds feel it immediately. So many times the higher mind is not directly in communication with the lower mind being exactly Gemini, where Uranus is in. So that's why we can experience the Uranus stationary energy as restlessness, as the mental sphere just not wanting to shut off. However, it doesn't mean that it makes, crystal clear, coherent, logical sense when it's turned on. It may be, how should I say, projecting itself into so very many different areas, things that we think about, that concern us, that is the preoccupation of the mind. So that can feel very, very stressful, like overthinking, like sleeplessness, sleep disturbances, um, or actually a weird combination between a certain kind of fatigue and sleepiness. This is because Saturn returned to Pisces. But at the same time, relaxation and true rest is not possible because there is an anxious sense, an overthinking, a sense of urgency, a sense, even if it doesn't make necessarily sense, logically, rationally rooted in the present, that something is imminently happening, gonna happen. Of course, this can be serendipity, this can be panic, this can be anxious energy, this can be worry energy. So we may be experiencing all of this in the present moment. Um, I do believe if I have to resume it in one word, I would say big restlessness. This is basically the nuance of this energy where something within us is very, very restless. This restlessness, of course, is gonna return on this around, of course, the 7th of November when Uranus re-enters, so moves back into Taurus, because it covers new old ground, if you know what I want to say. And it's a Taurus and Gemini from a humor perspective, alchemical perspective, energetic configuration, build, modus, etc. perspective are very, very different energies. So that's why we're going to be feeling the same restlessness then. But right now, it's much more in the mind. So Gemini, especially as I said, lower mind. What I mean by the lower mind, that function of the mind which perceives immediate reality, the immediate perceptual mind. The best example is with communication. Directly as you hear the words of someone, what do they mean? Because, many times in life, the meaning is within the words. So whatever we are being told, it may not mean literally what the words depict. That's why, contemplation. Communication is at best when it's filtered, taken diligently. But this is what I mean, the lower mind. Automatically, that's not provided. That takes training for us to filter communication, our own thoughts, because this is the other way around as well, where we don't say everything that comes to our mind, the intrusive thoughts, especially. So, the filter. So, that's what I mean by the lower mind. That's on fire. That's very, very active. And another keyword here with Uranus, very, very rebellious. Because Uranus is the planet of revolution and rebellion and uprising. And it loves being in the sign of Gemini. In Taurus, it could not bring forward its highest qualities because it is forced to be as slow as it possibly can exist for Uranus in Taurus. In Gemini, however, it can be as quick as it wants, as it Uranian heart desires, even though Uranus is the anti-heart because it doesn't measure things with emotion. It measures things with cold, hard, objective, if it's possible, empirical truth. That's Uranus. So again, in Gemini, it can really dish out what it wants. So immediately, I do believe the way we experience this stationary Uranus is media, communication, what is being shared. So tumult of information, so much so that it can overload our senses. And, Uranus many times is associated with, surprise, but that can also be not the pleasant one. Everything is flooded with accidents. Well, I have to say crimes, and this is because Uranus trines Pluto. Pluto many times has a lot to do with the effects of criminality, for example. So crimes, bad news. Also news which is a bit sci-fi. In the sense that, let's say a new technology just came out and it works. No problem with that. But remember the filter. Just because something works doesn't mean it's gonna produce some really beneficial effects. We need to contemplate first. Trial and error, put it to the test. That's also very much Uranus. For example, um, Uranus, with the discovery of Uranus and its integration into both astrology and astronomy, well, empirical science is based on exactly that trial and error. It needs to produce results that are, how should I say, based, rooted in safe, sound logic. And logic also applies to issues like, for example, morality. If something causes moral harm, well, then that's not beneficial. That's not logical to use it. So this is why technology is not enough that it works, that it does its job. A trial and error still needs to take place. That's why new technologies, groundbreaking, ultra, hyper, all of these that come out in the present moment may be altered, upgraded, withdrawn even in the very close future, especially when Uranus returns to Gemini, and that will be next year in 2026. But that's a totally different chapter. Also, with Uranus, I want to mention that it will go as far back as 27 degrees of Taurus. So that 27 degrees of Taurus is important for a number of different reasons. One of them is because it's very, very close. Many astrologers consider this a valid conjunction with the fixed star Algol at 26 degrees of Taurus. This is important because I'm not gonna go into exact dates, but the last time Uranus was here was around September last year. So this period last year, in 2024, a lot happened during that time. Okay, maybe this includes August and October last year as well, or maybe extends even further, but a lot happened. And we must not forget that these were mainly Taurian elements. So something that changed, for example, value, feelings about it, and things that customs, for example, customs, traditions. In tarot, Taurus is the high priest. So you see the traditional value of Taurus, because Taurus likes permanence. That can very well be a tradition. It doesn't have to be something necessarily physical, because a tradition makes something philosophical, spiritual, moral, etc. be physical. So it's very much included. So those are the effects that took place uh in the past when Uranus was around this. And Algol is usually, well, it's a very malevolent star, and it's the head of uh when Mars or Uranus or some shock factor planet conjuncts Algol, that's usually the moment when things change suddenly and for good. So we could experience regime changes. I do believe, especially in Syria, when Uranus was near those degrees. Then President Trump's assassination attempt was also when Uranus was near Algol. Um, in Iran, the president's helicopter crashed. I don't know if it was Uranus, but something was an Algol. Something was touching Algol at those times. So these are the events. So Uranus moving back here. Um, it will, how should I say, cause a lot of either reverberation, echoes of those past events. We will hear from them again. Or if they produce some changes, those changes are gonna be revised. So, yeah, this can affect us both collectively, but also individually. So, what happened, what in any way, shape, and form, what transpired in your life, especially what were your thoughts, what were your future views, or aspirations, or plans, or hopes, why not? Uh, especially last autumn, and what happened with those the course of events until the present moment, because this can change, or there can be a final, like keywords here with Uranus: upgrade, stepping up, greater authenticity, greater truth, something energized, electrified. It may even be a gesture, like a rebellious anything that has to do with the modus operandi of Uranus. So those things in your life may be, upgraded. Um, Another thing that is very tied with stationary Uranus is calamities, or, sudden eruptive events. Now, in Taurus, when it was in Taurus, those usually were like proper calamities, usually earthquakes, tsunami, volcano, also symbolic seismic activities politically, currency, money, everything Taurian. And personally speaking, our own senses, something shocked us. But in Gemini, this energy may be much more like airy. For example, something happens with communication, a cutoff, or a turbulence of some kind, or an accident where, let's say, it's not necessarily the hardware. The software spills the beans on something. Something just comes out by accident, and it can shock the whole world. A communication, an email, a phone talk, something comes out and shocks the world. AI. Uranus rules AI technology. So the AI may do something shocking. Um, Social media. And this is where it may take the place of freedom of speech, because Uranus is very linked to that, especially in the sign of Gemini. Whenever it was in Gemini, something happened with freedom of speech or communication. Of course, many times in a positive way. For example, Gutenberg or the first press, first newspaper, uh, even going back as the Holy Scripture being translated to one's natal language. So very many. Oh, and recently, if I'm not mistaken, Uranus and Gemini, um, the internet was born on invented under that energy. So in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. So very many relevant events, one way or another, that influenced communication happened with Uranus and Gemini. So now, when it's stationary, we can definitely expect things like that. Okay, with Uranus, the rule is expect the unexpected. We can't anticipate really. Even though this is the devil symbolically, of course, joke as a joke in Uranus, that it's the planet of anticipation. It wants you to anticipate and you can't. But very many times in life, exactly when we get to that energy, Gemini, the duality, when we want the impossible, interesting, fated, or highly innovative energies happen. Uh, 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 energies, I mean, twists, turnarounds of fate that lead to something totally new, something unheard of, undreamed of, unimagined, even. So, with Uranus, that's where, if Mercury is our own personal ingenuity and problem solving skills, it rules Virgo, right? Then Uranus is the divines. It is, let's say, gods, the cosmos is. So that's why it rules these unexpected, because the way the cosmos figures stuff out or comes up with solutions is so high level that for us it seems like an anomaly, right? But it's not many times. So, and Gemini is the best, one of the best, or actually the best. I'll go with the best sign to exemplify that, to manifest that, to dish that out. So there is method in the madness. There is some ingenuity in the dichotomy, because we can also see a dichotomy where like nuclear fusion, high pressure, or clashes that produce big amounts of energy, lightning, Uranus lightning, Gemini also lightning, as in lightning fast, or the air that hosts the lightning. So we can expect some big things in communication, not just now, but also when Uranus returns here next year. But we're speaking about the now because that's what we're living and that's what interests us immediately. Um, Another thing that I want to mention about Uranus, as it goes back on this 7th of November to 29 degrees of Taurus, it will hold a sextile with Neptune himself back at 29 degrees of Pisces. So this is a saving grace energy, because Uranus is usually mind over matter. This energy is deep faith and usually non-religious faith. In a sense, not non-dogmatic faith. Faith that you cannot find written down. Because Uranus is the revolutionary factor and Taurus is exactly the tradition. So your own, I have to emphasize on this, unique faith and relationship with the divine, with the parent organism, with the cosmos, in a non-traditional way. So faith, deep faith, and that deep faith involves understanding your inner world where you are God, right? And understanding your relationship with the cosmos. So a lot of understanding, whatever that means, because that understanding can be philosophical, can be psychological, emotional, and that which cannot even be defined. Because Pisces is that which has no shape and form, the unborn God, right? So it can be unique to you. An organ, an inner organ, an inner function, an inner element that only you possess. Why not? The universe is diverse. So that's why deep understanding is so important. But when we have that, that's why all the retrogrades, because Neptune himself shares Uranus's specifics in the sense that it's the last time it goes back into the sign it rules, Pisces. Last time, not forever, but in this current cycle. So Neptune won't return here for a lot of years. So in our lifetime is the last time when we get Neptune in Pisces. So very, very unique energy. So it's very powerful, and retrograde makes it even more powerful. Last time in our lifetimes is even more powerful. 29 degrees, the 29, and for Pisces 29 is literally, mathematically, the last degree of the zodiac, the omega, the gateway between the ether and the real world, the whale itself. Sextile, very, very important energy. Very, very, it depends on us, really. So faith over matter, Taurus matter, Uranus, mind over matter. So you see this cocktail of energy. If we need to change the world with just our inner frequency, our lives, our destinies, our past, our everything, even soul contract, rewrite everything, it begins this autumn. This is pure alchemical power, free alchemical power. Pluto Uranus trine under the stationary Uranus. The Pluto Uranus trine is at its most potent. And do not forget, Pluto is power. Aquarius, the home of Uranus, is higher mind. And the spirit, where the spirit enters into our inner cosmos. Because in Pisces, it's already in us. In Pisces, it's within. In Aquarius, it can still be in the ether, in the mind of God, just. Right? So very, very important energy where we can rewrite everything. Our own fate, the fate of the of course, the fate of the collective can only be rewritten by the collective. But this is exactly Aquarius, the duality of Aquarius, the two waves, the collective, but its primary component, the individual, both equal, both matter, and quantum, both mirror one another, even if in a Newtonian way, it doesn't make sense because the collective would outweigh the individual big time. In the quantum world, it's equal, right? So everyone, what they do with their own frequency has much, much bigger influence than us, than we can imagine. And in Pisces, what do we need to do? We must not forget that it's not just Neptune, but Saturn being there as well. And Saturn, this autumn, it will retrograde back towards 27, 6, 7, 6, something like that, degrees of Pisces, where it will trine Jupiter. I'm going to be speaking about Jupiter in just a little bit, but why is this important? Well, it's this autumn. It correlates and coincides with the Uranus back and Neptune back into Pisces energy, adding to it, and it's deeply fated. Jupiter loves being in the sign of Pisces. Sorry, Jupiter. I wanted to say Jupiter rules, core rules Pisces, and loves being in the sign of Cancer. So you see how Jupiter is not his shy self. It really can bring a lot to the table. We are trying to Saturn permit. That's the good part. So Jupiter Saturn trines are very, very good for permission, whatever that means. Permission to the self, permission of the authority, permission of mom, dad, permission of the world, permission of God, permission of. It flows, it's good. Rarely, because this is retrograde, it's a blockage that it's impossible to overcome no matter what someone does. You will not over. But that usually, if that's the case, that blockage is saving your life in a way that you don't even know it. That's the best thing that can happen to you. This is where, let me give you a silly example. No matter what you do, the plane ticket cannot be bought. You have the money. First, it's a software glitch, and the software glitch somehow makes it impossible for you to book it. But for you, it's deadly important to be on that specific. It's impossible. It couldn't be done. You have to admit defeat. The only way you can do is go, outside of your comfort zone and even, sanity zone and try to go there by other means than flight. It's a tragedy. You're so annoyed that you need to, you even end up, let's say, in the ER with palpitations. Of course, it's nothing serious, it's just the annoyance. But at the date of your travels, that flight crashed. And you see how immediately the frequency stops and it blows your mind and it twists your fate. It twists everything you would have believed. Because you see the saving grace and that the universe made it impossible for you to get on that flight. But that's so rare. But if that's the case, if something is blocking you and it doesn't, like a stubborn dog, a stubborn donkey, it's not moving, then remember my example. Maybe it's the best thing that could have ever happened to you and you don't even know it. But for most people, anyone else, it's a permission. It flows. Finally, it can take place. It can, Um, so it's not just the Neptune-Uranus sextile, but there's also other elements supporting it big time. And the reason why I'm focusing on this deeply alchemical side of astrology, because there's going to be a lot of turmoil, chaos, doom, gloom, not nice and violent protests, maybe uprisings in the air around us. So we will need the power of faith, and we will need the power that external reality cannot determine my life, but vice versa. Even if that's an act of rebellion, Uranus. Why would I say this? Well, one individual usually is not the best expression of energy when they go against everything. Because usually the universe extinguishes that flame. Let me give an example. Um, Something massively tragic happened. Let's not go into detail. A massive tragedy. The whole world is in tears. You're not gonna celebrate something in your life to the maximum potential. You're gonna also give the tribute to the tragedy, even if the celebration goes on. Would you not? You can imagine the universe will extinguish your celebration because it's provocative, it's arrogant. Not under this energy, not this autumn. In this energy, this is the exception, the rarity when you must go against everything, the whole world. In frequency, in frequency, in philosophy, in this autumn, because that's the only way we change. That's the only way we break the doom and gloom. And sometimes breaking the doom and gloom is a must, because the universe feeds on joy. We poison it with too much doom and gloom. Sometimes Saturn in Pisces. It's every single soul's responsibility to stop doom and gloom, to stop the victim, to stop the sorrow, to stop the same old, Pisces, same old, Saturn, same old, retrograde for the last time. In this cycle, we must stop the same old, same old. So we now understand what Uranus retrograde is cooking up, preparing. And now let's speak about other energies. Now, I want to say that the sextile between Uranus back in Taurus and Neptune back in Pisces will take place around the 22nd of October this year. And the trine with Jupiter and Saturn is somewhere in November this year. So with this, let's speak about Jupiter a little bit, because Jupiter loves being in a sign of Cancer. This is where it's its lucky energy. It's nice energy. Wish fulfillment type of energy, but not necessarily in a spiritual way, in a miraculous way where it's the divine, but more like people way. Mommy, daddy, family, someone who loves you, community, etc. In more like the power of love way. Because Cancer is nurture. Cancer is all of us together. The power of unity, the power of, yeah, that's Pisces as well, but Pisces is just the feeling. It's not action. Cancer is also action. Cancer is the nurture. So this is the good kind of Jupiter. This year, so Jupiter is here every 12 years. This 12 years, many people said to me that, yeah, the lucky Jupiter, this Jupiter, but it doesn't feel like that. What's up? Well, what's up is the energetic energies that are upcoming. What do I mean by that? Well, as I said, Uranus is aiming for 29 degrees of Taurus. Neptune, Saturn is actually energetic. Pisces, as we speak right now, the shadowy side of things. When Jupiter in Cancer has no choice but to provide self-care with a reality check beforehand, well, that's what it needs to do. Because some things need to stop in our lives for us to embrace the true meaning of what's good for us. Because Jupiter is the planet of belief. Sometimes we simply don't believe that something is harmful. Let me go into examples. The quickest thing that comes to my mind is social media AI usage. Where is the AI really your friend or not? No. So that means that Jupiter has to detox, cut this off before it gets the honey, the self-nurture care honey to the person. Because if it gives the honey now, it is harmful, more harmful than good. Or a toxic relationship. Before it can bless the person, it needs to get them out of the relationship, and the person may be intoxicated, like drugged, symbolically speaking, with the relationship. They might not see the toxicity yet. Jupiter needs to, the Jupiter can't bless the person if the person is in the toxic relationship. Why? Because maybe the blessing will belong solely to the toxic partner, the thief energy, in any way, vampiric energy, or the blessing will just make the wound when the toxicity will be revealed that much worse, etc., etc. Like, example within an example. If the girl receives a house from mom, dad to get married to the toxic partner, you can imagine that house will be shared when they divorce. He won't deserve that money. Yet another example, misaligned belief that you believe in, but it it's not good for you. Let example when it's then an example again, some political ideology. It can be true for so very many people. And the people we see in social media and on TV and our politicians are definitely those people. Their ideologies are, I don't want to use insulting words, but silly. Philosophically speaking, silly. Um, or other example of this, where your parents, because Cancer family, are debilitating you with too much care. They won't kick you out. They won't ask for rent. They pump money. You don't have to lift a finger for anything. We see how that is not positive. We see how that is positive to an extent, and how that starts becoming very, very negative to the degree of debilitating. So This is why this year, remember Saturn and Neptune for the last time in Pisces, that represents the last phase of the elimination. So Jupiter has to use this opportunity to eliminate what it needs to eliminate for the sake of the blessing. And Saturn, and like imagine Neptune like dissolving acid in Pisces. It can take that shape and form. The removing the rust, removing the grime, removing the filth, removing the infection, removing the parasite, removing the vampire, removing that which is harmful. So this is why Jupiter, these early months of its stay in Cancer, does not feel like the typical Jupiter in Cancer yet. However, this is why we need to go to this November, the November this year, because that's when we might feel it for the first time, really, truly, genuinely. The Jupiter that we know and are used to and welcome. Because before it can genuinely dish out the nurture, the care, the protection, the love, the solidarity, the anything nice, it 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 needs to be sure that we can actually use it, that it serves our higher good and not spoil us or harm us later on. So this is why right now Jupiter may seem a little bit rough and tough, but know that when it entered in May, something like that, a Cancer, it immediately held a square with Saturn Neptune. So, you know what I mean. Uh, it is a bit rough, Jupiter, but be patient. The positive side of it will show itself later on this autumn. So, yeah, I hope that this recording was helpful. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to hype the video if you can, because I want to see what it does. Thank you so much for everyone who hyped my previous video, but I still don't see any difference at all. So, thank you again. Until next time, bye for now.